Okay, so welcome to the 16th episode of the Rick Bisson podcast, and delighted and pleased to be here with Benjamin,
Your favorite youngest son.
my favorite ever all-time youngest son.
I
And
fought hard for that.
yes, you did. Came kicking and screaming
Yeah.
out and into that. So today's topic is judgment, and I'm not talking about the end of the world judgment. I'm talking about judgment of others and judgment of ourselves.
I'm glad that's the version we're talking about.
Well, and I will tell you that this has been something that over the past few weeks has kind of been tickling in my brain. And it is absolutely amazing how so many things have steered me in this direction to think about this more, to say, I got to talk about this because it's been in my RAS, my reticulating activation system, close enough. And in what I've listened to, what I've read, and what my thinking has brought me to, it's like, I just got to talk about this. Classic example of just yesterday. We're in a class in real estate yesterday, and I'm not going to name names I'm not going to be specific. I'm going to be pretty broad. I personally struggle quite a bit with judgment of others. And we're in this class, and it's this clean-cut looking guy that's going to present for us. And the particular field that he is in, for me, causes me to create an immediate story about who he is and how he's going to be. And that type of person, internally for me, is hard for me to engage in and not feel I'm not threatened by them. I am annoyed by them, I guess is what I would say. And it's extremely frustrating to me because on the outside is what I portray, and how I'm hoping what I portray outside is that I'm accepting of everyone and I'm engaged in everyone, and I'm working hard every day to change my insides to be like my outsides. It's an extreme battle every day. So, I'm seeing this guy, I'm watching him posture himself, and everything, his boots, how he's dressed, how he stands in front of us. It just all fits into this category of, this guy's going to drive me crazy. I got to listen to him for 3 hours. And, when I stripped all that away and he started talking and listened to his content and delivery, he was amazing. He was absolutely spot on. I learned more in that class than probably any other class like that I've taken in real estate. I think we all did. We all gained. You were there. I gained an awful lot of knowledge. And more than that, I gained a tremendous amount of awareness because of what I've been thinking over the past few weeks about my own internal judgment. So, just the whole idea of judgment, I looked up just for some quick definition of judgment, and I give credit to a guy named Christopher Lindsay who wrote this, and I Googled him. I Googled this topic. That's how his name came up, or the quote came up. But he said there are three traits of judgmental people. Those are commonly that those people are overly critical, they show no respect for the person they are critical of, and they justify what they say because they believe it is true. So they're overly critical, no respect for the other person they're critical of, and they believe whatever they're thinking is true. And it goes back to that, we people say things or act in certain ways, we create an immediate story in our head that we look at evidence within ourselves to make true. We don't know that person, and we've sized them up in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
This reminds me of Scott Adams, the author of Dilbert, has talked in the past about pattern recognition and how we're not really logical creatures. We don't reason everything out. If we did, we would never get anything done because it takes so long to reason something out, really. We're pattern recognition machines. And you have seen patterns in the past of someone showing up looking like this, someone showing up in this industry, someone showing up acting this way. Maybe when they walked in the door that they said something or they didn't say anything, whatever it is. Maybe it was, a way he looked around the room, whatever it is. All these patterns are lining up where you're like, yep, I've seen this before and I know how this goes. And you could have been right because your patterns laid out in a certain way created a judgment, and there was, I don't want to say 50% either way, but there was a chance that you were right or a chance that you were wrong. There were really two options. And you were wrong, thank goodness, because it was an awesome experience. And sometimes your pattern recognition is what keeps you safe. Sometimes it helps you to recognize an opportunity. Okay, I see this person is, asking questions here about this, and I know there's a certain amount about their circumstance that, oh, here's an opportunity, let me, help them, and then you help them. But in another circumstance, that pattern recognition leads you to maybe go, this isn't an opportunity when it really is, but you didn't see any of the flags fly up. Or, here's someone who's a good person. Everything lines up. Such a nice guy. Everybody loves them. They have a good marriage. It looks like they have a good marriage. And then you find out 10 years later that they were having an affair the whole time. They stole money, blah, blah, blah. Your patterns didn't match up to reality. Or the opposite of doesn't have the best reputation. Maybe you know some stories of what happened with them back in the day. You knew them in high school. They've gone bankrupt, twice. Well, turns out you get to know them. They're the realest, rawest, most honest. They don't lie. They'll tell you all the things that they did wrong and the stuff that they did wrong last week, not just 10 years ago. They'll tell you about all the lessons they learned from going bankrupt, all the lessons they learned from their failed marriage, and how they love their new wife so much better because of, that experience. And man, it's like we can be so wrong. And sometimes we're right. And there is value in pattern recognition. But that's the judgments that we're making and we do it to ourselves too. I know you are going to get into this.
Yeah. Well, you touched on something there while I was reading about judgment and trying to sort of get some more insight into it, that judgment can also come from our inner fight or flight. So you meet somebody, you quickly address them as either a
threat.
Again, I was going to say, yeah, exactly. I was going to say threat. They're either a threat or they're ally. And, you size that up so quickly. And sometimes you have to. I mean, if it's a 30-second encounter and you've got to make that decision, you got to go with your gut. It's the opportunities that we have to go beyond that are short-sighted, that will cause people to really miss out on awesome relationships. Because when I look at this guy that we were with yesterday, I looked at him throughout this 3-hour experience, and the more we got to the end of the experience, the more I realized that he is so much like one of my very best friends.
I noticed that too. And we haven't even talked about this until just now, but every time he opened his mouth, I was like...
The more he gave us, the more he fed us, the more I was like, that's him.
Yep.
That's my friend.
Yeah. Yep.
He's not my enemy.
100%.
Yeah.
He even whistled. Just like him. We don't need to get into that.
Not going to say the jokes were the same, but...
Well, we might identify who...
Yes.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really great. Which is funny because there are people that walk into a room that I feel the same way you felt this about. I didn't feel that about him, and maybe I would say we have very different who we judge.
Yeah, well, there was a particular
but
thing. A particular thing that happened, just to point out how we look at people differently. You and I, we spent almost 31 years together, and how differently we look at things.
Totally.
Although we've spent at least 20, however many years those directly together, that he said some things that I took as directing them towards the people in the room.
Yes.
He was talking about our industry. He was talking about the industry, I think. And I took that as, okay, he's pointing out the realtors in the room. When in fact, you could interpret that differently as I'm talking about the whole...
The broader industry,
the
mortgage industry, the banking industry.
Titles,
right.
all those things,
Yes.
not just the
inspectors,
the realtors. Everybody
the consumer.
did this. Yeah, the consumer involved. And, that just goes to show how different people are going to judge based on... And so this is the second piece of this, which is the self-judgment. When you... What voice is in your head when you do something? And, for me, I'm a very positive person. I'm an encouraging person. I'd love to be the chief encouraging officer, of the world, if I could. That would be my greatest role.
Yeah.
So, I want to encourage people. Well, what happens to me when I do something wrong? Do I use words that I don't let anybody else use, that I never let my kids use? Sure I do, They're not swear words, by the way. However, I'll down myself, when I do something wrong or the smallest of things. And I even heard this guy do it yesterday that was presenting to us.
Yep.
He did something wrong on the board, and he said, you could just hear him.
What are you doing, you idiot?
Yeah, something like that.
That's what he said.
That's what he said. Yeah. And so that's the self-judgment.
It's the inner critic.
The inner critic that causes us to lower our self-esteem, to really what we're doing is we're taking our ability to love ourselves, to fully engage ourselves, where we're not allowing our best self to come through. There's this, hammer, whacking ourselves on the head, we're getting slapped by a ruler all the time, every time we do something wrong. And where does that come from? Or better yet, how do you change that pattern so that you're not feeling that way? You're the need for confidence, self-confidence, self-acceptance, which, it's love, love for yourself. How can you love others? How can you be your best self to others if you don't have an internal ability to love yourself and to accept yourself? Because unless you have that connection with yourself, you can't heal yourself. You can't heal those problems. So how can you then help others?
Yeah. I think very often you see people that love others well, typically love themselves very well. When you see people that are just terrible to other people, they have no self-esteem, or they are incapable or haven't learned how to love themselves. And there are people that love others well that do not love themselves well, but you can see that it's like an effort-based, I need to love others well in order to have some self-esteem or something like that. Whereas people that have a natural love for themselves, a natural self-confidence, or see themselves in a positive light, they just treat everyone really well. They have a good relationship with themselves. They have, when they say they are going to show up, they show up. When they say, they could say, I'm a good person, because they know they have a track record of that. And then that confidence allows them to have confidence in others. And to see people that show up and encourage them and say, hey, you show up every time. Why don't you love yourself? What's something's not right here. And that inner critic, I think this comes kind of to mindfulness, which is removing your thoughts are like things passing by you. I'm an idiot. That should just pass. It should pass by you, and you either go yes or no. It's a thought passing by. I'm the best in the world. Pass by or grab. It's like, well, I'm not the best in the world, and I'm not an idiot. So maybe I let both those go by. I'm doing my best. Am I doing my best? Yes. Okay, I grab that thought and I say, yes, I'm doing my best. And if you've ever sat there and watched your thoughts like consciously,
Mm.
and they call it like a higher mind or, lower mind, higher mind type thing, where your emotions are just kind of coming across. And some people just roll with those, whatever they are.
Mm.
I'm down today, I'm up tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Someone that's kind of like pure essence or that's meditated on who they are and develop themselves. They watch thoughts come and go, and then they decide with a conscious mind, I am or I am not that.
Mm.
They don't operate based on whatever's coming across the feed.
Mm.
And making a mistake on the whiteboard, I'm an idiot. I'm sure he doesn't think he's an idiot.
Right.
He's incredibly competent.
Mm-hmm.
He lets himself say those things, which, some people would say is bad. Some people would say, like, well, if he doesn't believe it, who cares? But it definitely is, like, something to pay attention to.
Mm. Well, and I think, if nothing else, that message or that statement speaks to those that are around you. When he said, I'm an idiot, everybody heard him say that. And so in their minds, oh, yeah, I'm an idiot sometimes, and I'm not Pollyanna. Well, I may be to some extent, but, I am a realist as well, that we have to do the best to be the best that we are.
Right.
To be helpful to others.
Right.
And something that really inspired me an awful lot around this topic is I listened to Ed Milet's podcast a week, I guess it was last week's maybe, and he interviewed with, I can't pronounce the guy's name, I'm sorry, but he goes by the name of The Humble Poet, and he's written a book it's on love. It's on love and being loved. And the guy is incredibly insightful, and he talked a fair amount during this interview about self-judgment. And he just offered words that were so encouraging to the need to allow yourself to be the best version of yourself and to work on that, to not feel like, not to seek other people to fill that void, not to bury the void, that you have to go there. You gotta dig into yourself. It's okay to say no to other people in order to correct yourself if you need that time. And he said, in terms of the self-judgment, he said, often the biggest stumbling block to being our best selves, we judge because we're insecure, and we're insecure because we judge.
It's like a negative feedback
loop.
Like
a negative feedback loop, yeah.
And really, I mean, it's kind of you can be the tallest tree in the forest, or you can cut every other tree down in order to be the tallest. And that's, whether you're doing it externally or internally, is what's happening. You're insecure. And in order to feel like I'm a good person, because you're not. You're not really a good person. You're not perfect. You have your flaws, and you want to hedge those and cover them up. And, it's not important to be organized, or it's not important to whatever it is that you're insecure about. And then, in addition to that, you also point out, well, they're organized, but geesh, they sure are rigid, or whatever it is to say, they might have these qualities that are good, but really their negatives kind of outweigh it, and therefore I'm a little bit better. But in doing that, like you said, you're eroding your self-confidence because you're judging everyone.
Yeah.
And so that leads you to do it more and more, which is like any negative behavior.
Yeah, and it's so true about, you may see somebody who really has themselves, you can tell they've got themselves in good order.
Figured out.
They are present. They are good with themselves. They're the best self that they can probably be. Do they struggle some? Probably, but they really present themselves, and they are really put together. And so what do we say about those kind of people? Maybe they're a little cocky.
Yeah.
And we've just created that loop again.
Right. Or we look for some other area. Someone's very competent in a certain area of life. Great business person.
Yeah.
Oh, well, have you seen their family, or have you seen him and his wife together? Or they have a great family, but it's like, well, yeah, but he's, great family, but geez, he hasn't done much with his life, or whatever. All these and I don't say any to say there are a lot of people out there that are judgmental and this is what they're doing. It's like, it's me.
Yeah.
I'm doing this. And I didn't look at that guy yesterday and think, oh man, I looked at him and was kind of like, oh, this is someone I can learn from, because he's got the right pants and boots on. I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
But someone else who walks in with, a different set of clothes, I'm not even going to describe it because I don't want anyone to have a read on who I'm judging out there. But there's someone that could walk through the room where I'm like, oh, you are the reason there's something wrong with the world. When really it's like we all do different things, wear different clothes, talk differently, have different passions, different strengths, organized versus chaotic, creative versus systematic.
Yeah.
These are all, it says, the ear shouldn't resent the eye shouldn't resent the nose. We all have different things that we're doing for the world, different strengths we bring to businesses, to families. I mean, someone, cooks and someone cleans, someone, is an organizer and someone's, adding on to the house or looking at the future. Another person's enjoying the present. We all have different things that we do. And the more that I can, which is difficult, the more that I can get in tune with how is this person making the world better and how am I going to help them in the ways that I can without being, trying to fix them or whatever, just help them, offer my services or we do it in our business with different clients. There are some clients that want to work with you and they want to spend, time and talk, and other ones that want to walk in and be like, this is not the place, and walk out. Well, we have someone else for you.
Yeah.
Some people want to look at all the numbers. Okay, well, we'll get someone to put together a spreadsheet. Other people, want to talk about how the room is light filled and the carpet could be a different color, which would bring out the, there's different things. There's different people. So we really I'm really trying to not, let that slow us down, but to move us forward.
Right.
To make it a strength rather than a weakness.
Yeah, and that's, another thing that this humble poet said. He said, again, going back to the self-judgment piece, we don't know what people see of us. However, we're judging ourselves based on what we think people are seeing. And that, you think about that for a minute. We're judging ourselves on what we think people see of us. I have no idea what you see of me.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Your mother, I've been married to her for 37 years, and we've had a couple of years before that. I have no idea what she sees. I know what I think she sees, and then I create a story about it, and I make it true.
Right.
And it's not. Last night we came home. We were driving home from Portland, 45-minute drive, and I got a lot going on. I'm under quite a bit of fire to get a couple of things solved. And so I got this internal clock that's just going, and I've got her giving me some suggestions, and I'm doing my best to be calm and, reacting as positively as I can be. And then we dropped you off, and we had a couple more minutes, and I said, I can't talk right now. I'm doing my best.
Meanwhile, I'm talking about politics in the back of the car. ever helpful.
So we get home, and I stayed in the truck for a little while and finished a few things, got them straightened out, went inside and said, I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't, if I came across as short or whatever, I didn't mean to. Oh, no, everything's fine. I mean, and her, if there was something wrong, I would have known.
Oh, yeah.
I would have known.
And you wouldn't have known going into it that you were doing whatever because you would have been absorbed in the moment.
Right.
And she would have been like, why are you being like that? And that happens in every marriage, not unique to you guys. And what's funny is thinking about her communication style, it's so direct, versus I have this trait too, although I would say I'm more direct in my marriage. You and I can make something kind of like more political or like, well, neither this nor that, and maybe this, and people are like, Mom are like, what are you saying? You're not saying anything.
Yes.
Whereas in that situation, you said, hey, I can't talk right now. You communicated the expectation succinctly, not like, hey, I really like you and I love to spend time together. It's like, okay, where are you going?
Wrong
you said
audience.
it. You said it, and so then the behavior was expected beyond that. Whereas if you had not said anything and you had been short each and every time, and maybe she would have said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you treating me like this?"
Right.
And then you said, "Well, I'm under pressure and this and that." It's like, well, that's no excuse.
Yeah.
But because you communicated it up front, the behavior is kind of like, okay, he's under pressure, I'll give him some space, or how can I help you, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yes. So funny. And it just speaks to the length of time that I've known her, known you, and how that can be misperceived, and how you take somebody that you've just met 5 minutes ago or 2 weeks ago, you've spent a half an hour with them, and your stories are just being made up. What they're thinking about you have written a book about.
Totally.
And you don't even know.
Yeah. And you mentioned, being with someone who's close to you. I was talking with someone recently about how, being in a new relationship, and how, you think you know what the other person's thinking, and then you actually have a kind of spotlighted conversation on that issue, and you find out that they are way off from what you thought. Could be a relationship, it could be a business partner, or a business vendor or something like that, where you have a communication that you just think that they think you're an idiot, or that they think you should go left when they really think you should go right, and you then talk about it, and your assumption is just so wrong. And assumptions, like we said earlier, move the world forward. We would not be able to do what we do, and the fight or flight thing, we're descended from people that had to know when to run or stay. If there was a threat, to run or stay, fight or flight. And we're descended from people that survived. Well, most of them probably assumed a threat was worth paying attention to, at least, if not running from. And so we immediately see the prospect of threat, and we are programmed, because we're descended from those people, to listen to that.
Yeah.
And so we are fighting that, and we need to listen to it and say, okay, my gut says something's not wrong here, and you should listen to that. However, you should also pay attention and not assume your gut is right. But go, my gut says this, I'm going to watch. And you watch and watch and watch and watch and watch until 3 hours later in your course, you're like, hey, my gut was totally wrong.
Yeah.
And this guy is someone I would love to
spend time with,
hang out with, socialize with, work with, partner with, have on the podcast. It's just crazy.
Crazy. And, you're extremely insightful. And
I did not come up with that, by the way. I have listened to other people talk about that.
Well, and the reason I say that is because I've been listening to this information in the past few weeks about judgment, and one of the things that's identified in this book by the humble poet is our origins and what our brains have patterned around. And they patterned around, in the beginning, a very small community where you had to gain acceptance, approval, or you wouldn't survive.
Right.
Because if you didn't provide and, get approval for doing what the small group needed, you were out.
Yeah.
You were out.
Yeah. And your brain is looking for snakes in the grass. I mean, you're looking for people in society, and that's whenever society has gotten out of control, Nazis, stuff like, Mao China, like these terrible situations that have happened. What's happened is snakes in the grass have gone without being put back in their place and said, no, you will not be a part of society. And it's when we all go along with a terrible idea. And we need to constantly be looking for snakes in the grass to weed out and say, you are terrible. Get out of here. We need judgment. Judgment is incredibly valuable to make, to draw lines in the sand of what behavior is okay and what behavior is not.
Right.
And we need to be capable of dealing with that and saying, absolutely not. You are not going to speak to that person like that. And we need to do it in our own hearts and say, you're not going to talk to your spouse like that. You're not going to treat yourself like that. The descendant conversation is really interesting, because there's a lot of things that, we have descended from, the public speaking nerves. They talk about how that is because if you spoke in public in a small tribal society, you were probably defending your life, and you were probably making a case for why you're not a snake in the grass, or why you should be allowed to live, or why we shouldn't go fight that other tribe because we're all going to die,
Right.
and there's twice as many of them. And so these things that are all programmed into us are incredibly valuable, but we don't live in a tribal society anymore. We live in a modern, sophisticated society where there's probably going to be food on my table next week. There's probably going to be oil in my oil tanks. There's probably going to be hot water, drinkable water. And so we need to use our gut, which is incredibly valuable, but also put it aside. And when Elon Musk talked about, in something I was listening to him talk about, he said, don't follow cynics and pessimists. Their belief systems are self-fulfilling. Don't follow cynics and pessimists. Their belief systems are self-fulfilling. And he said, I'd rather be an optimist and be wrong than a pessimist and be right.
Amen.
And so I think like integrating your gut and your deep human abilities with, modern mindsets and modern perspectives is a huge challenge. And I'll throw you in another class tomorrow, and you'll be fighting the same thing again.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
And it could be the opposite. It could be the teacher walks in, and you're like, this guy's going to be amazing. And then he's like a terrible person, and it's so boring. You just don't know which way it's going to go. Or you could be totally right one way or the other. So
yeah, another thing that came out of this book, and I haven't read the book yet. It's on my list.
This is The Humble
Poet. Yes. And he talked about how, we're all looking for acceptance, and we're self-judging ourselves, and how the media in general, not just, I'm not talking about cable TV, I'm talking about any type of media that we're exposed to, is creating the sense of pain. They're basically preying on our pain. That, let's say, they're advertising that if you don't feel good about how your hair looks, buy this. If you don't feel good about how your skin looks, and they'll show people with acne or whatever, they'll buy this product.
Right.
If the ladies aren't paying attention to you because you're wearing this garment,
outdated whatever,
shirt, sweatshirt, pants, whatever it is, you should buy this. And how they're driving us to need all these things that we don't need.
Right.
Who cares?
Yeah. Well, that gets into pain versus pleasure, which we talk about a lot, and is a very important tool in everything for our own motivation. If you say, hey, I will give you, a vacation at the end of the year if you do this, I'm somewhat likely to do it. If you tell me, like, I'm going to take your house away at the end of the year, I am going to do it. And it depends on how big the reward is and how big the pain is, but we are inclined as humans, getting back to the, who we're descended from, to move away from pain much more than we are to move towards pleasure. And so if you want to get someone to do something for good or bad, it's not good to manipulate people, but you could maybe talk about the pain. And that's what people do. I come to you and I say, hey, I have this great idea. Then you might say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? We don't often come up with a great idea and go, hey, man, think about it. You could be a millionaire. Think about it. It could change your family's trajectory forever. Hey, man, if we want to convince someone of something, we convince them of the pain of not doing what we think they should do, and the pleasure of, if they do what we think they should do, how it will be so great. And vice versa. If we want to prevent them from doing something, we tell them about the pain that they'll experience if they do it, and the pleasure if they, don't do the thing that we think they shouldn't do. And that's kind of, what you're talking about with the Humble Poet, talking about that.
Yeah. I highly recommend the book. I must admit I haven't read it yet, but just the excerpts that I heard from this conversation were pretty amazing.
So that was Ed Milet's podcast?
Ed Milet's podcast,
with the Humble Poet?
Just this past week. It was when it was.
We can add that to the show notes.
Show notes, yeah, exactly right. And, so I have been focused on judge not. It's one of my daily affirmations that I write on my planner every day. And it's just amazing how just these past few weeks, it's just been heightened to me that, judge not. And, there's For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you.
Mm.
Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing, will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure will be measured out to you. And Jesus makes it so simple. And, of course, maybe simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
Yeah. So, continual self-improvement. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Mm.
So, I'll continue to work on self. And, really that whole thing of coming back to stop judging myself. That is the realization that I have come from this more than anything else. Not how much I judge others. I got to stop judging me to not judge others.
Okay, because you kept talking after you did that mic drop thing with the with the measure poured out to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that the best way to move forward is not with a negative, not with a not, but with a do. So, in judge not, it's an action to not do, but we need an action to do. And what you always say is love everybody always. And so love myself always, love everybody always. And that is going to be how we don't judge, how we don't judge ourselves, don't judge others, is by loving everybody always, loving ourselves always, and unconditionally. I mean, you can't make progress if you're holding on to who you were. If I thought I was the same person I was in elementary school, I would think I didn't know how to do math, I didn't know how to handle money, but I've grown and I've said, you know what, I'm not who I was in elementary school. Okay, what about high school? Am I stuck there? Am I believing I'm still the same person I was in high school? College, how I treated people in college? I sure hope not. I wouldn't still be married. I wouldn't have made it 5 years of marriage if I treated people the way I treated them in college. Am I the person I was 5 years ago, 5 years out of college? Definitely not. I didn't know. I hadn't been married yet. I've had a lot of edges smoothed in marriage, and so if you hold yourself to your identity being who you've always been, not being a dynamic person, not reinventing yourself, not changing your identity to someone who loves yourself, someone who loves others, then you're going to keep doing what you've always done. You have to draw a line in the sand and separate who you were from who you are. And if you don't do that, you will always be stuck wherever you've drawn the line in the sand and said, from 22 on, I'm the same person. Right. But you're 60-something.
I'm 60.
You're 60. And you are not the same person you were when you had your accident. Geesh, I mean, not even close. Well, there was a season after your accident where you were like doing things and living in a way that was very different than before your accident, but also is very different to what you do now.
Right.
You're much more balanced now. You're much more, in your lane, knowing your strengths. What's my purpose? You were asking yourself, what is my purpose, 8 years ago?
Yes.
Now, maybe you're asking yourself that, but you're not asking it in the same way that you were back then. And
Right.
so who are you today? Well, you're someone very different than you were, 3 years after your accident. And so you need to be who you are today and who you're becoming, not who you used to be.
Yes. And I guess I'll piggyback on that this is not something that everybody can figure out on their own. Some people may be able to say, okay, self-assessment, self-evaluation, say, I am this today, I am going to be this starting tomorrow. And they may make that happen. Some people will need to get help.
Yeah.
And, that is something that they should embrace and accept and because they may not be able to get out of or away from themselves without somebody else's involvement and help. And that has to be acceptable and okay.
Yeah. And we did a whole episode on mentorship and I mean, we should probably do one on community, but the mentorship one kind of covered this, which is like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, like if you don't like who you are, look at who you're surrounded with and start dropping people like flies that aren't making you better. Because there are people that don't want you to get better.
Right.
Everyone has them in your life.
They're
People
that
that want,
pessimist that, you know.
yeah, or they just want you to stay who you were in high school or who you are right now.
Yeah.
Well, like I don't want to be who I am right now.
Mhm.
I want to be who I'm going to be in the future. That's a better version of myself. And if you don't want to help me get there, then we're not hanging out. And then, you know, look at who you do want to be like. Who do you want to become? And ask those people if you can spend a little bit of time with them. Or, you know, the thing that's highly underrated, I think, is who you spend time with when you're not spending time with anyone and you're on your phone. Like,
Yes.
what are you looking at? What are you watching? What podcasts are you listening? You're talking about listening to Ed Milet and Bob Goff and Jordan Peterson and, you know, Tim Ferriss and Linda McKissick and, you know,
NEF
Gary
Downs.
Keller, NEF Downs.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you hang out with when you're not hanging out with anyone. And we don't really have we know that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with in person because we've watched that happen for, you know, thousands of years. We don't know what's going to happen to the next few generations that spend time with people on TikTok and Instagram and podcast app and YouTube, you know, 8 hours a day and it's negative, or 8 hours a day and it's all positive.
Because back in the beginning, acceptance was earned by doing what was required for survival. And if you perform those things, then you were accepted. And again, something that's in this Humble Poet book is today, anybody engaged in social media, Facebook, Instagram, there's metrics established for what's acceptable, what's embraced, what's liked, what's disliked, what's loved. And so it's immediate feedback on wearing this versus wearing that. And that's just a scary slope.
Yeah, it can be used for good. Just the difference between, they're talking about the difference between TikTok in China and TikTok in America. TikTok's a Chinese company. And in China, the version of TikTok that they have, I can't remember the name, they only show like really educational, empowering videos, and kids can only have access to it for a very limited amount of time a day. And it's like the idea is to make their country better and like push this app and let all of its influence be for the positive impact in China. Well, the TikTok that we have in the U.S. is essentially run the exact opposite way. I believe there are kids' versions of TikToks that parents can set up. I don't have TikTok, so I don't really know. But basically, like, the more idiotic and the more viral something is, the more the algorithm pushes it. So it's basically a psychological warfare, a psyop that is functioning to the detriment of our country. So, you know, okay, well, get off TikTok or curate your TikTok so you are like squared away. I mean, I like have to unfollow stuff all the time on Instagram, or, you know, mute people or whatever and I've been guilty of that in the past too. I'm not perfect here, but really curating what I'm consuming so that, you know, I talk to Mariana about this all the time. I am so vulnerable to the emotion of what's going on in the world, that if things aren't looking good, or, you know, I'm very optimistic. So when I'm influenced by pessimism, it's like toxic for me. And I'll go so negative so fast and be like, oh, it's all falling apart. And it's even worse, you know. So to me, I can't be around it. It's not that I'm like bulletproof to it. It's like I don't get in a firefight with that stuff. And so I think it's important for us to really spend time eliminating negative influences in our life. At least for me, it is, and increasing the amount of positive influence.
So what I wanted to come back to was, you know, not all of us can do this alone, and some of us will need to seek professional help. Psychiatrist, priest, pastor, friend, someone. And that there's a lot of self-judgment in our society about reaching out for help. And you got to do it.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do. It's going to, I've also heard lately a lot, and I think it might have been this book about happiness and gratefulness. And those are things that are you happy or are you feeling happy? They're feelings that you really have. And if you have that feeling of being happy, that's where you'll come from. But if you aren't happy, you got to find some happiness somewhere or other. You got to find that feeling of happiness.
Yeah.
And somebody may need to help you get there.
Right. And I don't think most of us have not earned the happiness we want to feel. Like happiness is like looking in the mirror and you see the muscles that you worked for after you worked out 3 months straight, ate clean, did all the things you said you were going to do. That's happiness, is looking in the mirror and seeing the results that you wanted. Happiness is not going to the gym at 6 a.m. and not eating garbage food. Like no one wants, that's just not, some people want to do that. It's not inherently fun. It doesn't make you happy to do that. The happiness is looking back and going like, I did it. Getting there to happiness, like you have to earn that. You have to and I would say, you mentioned gratitude. Like gratitude is like, I wake up in the morning and I'm grateful that I have, a warm bed, hot meal, shower, a gym that I can go to, or the ground that I can do push-ups off of. It doesn't take much to have gratitude.
Right.
I don't live in a war-torn country. I came from, a good family, or I'm providing a good family. I didn't come from a good family, but you know what? My kids have a great father or, a great mother. These are the things I can be grateful for. And those things carry you through so that you can do the things you need to do and then look back and go, I did it. I'm happy.
And just like that with gratitude, the self-judgment, you just start with small pieces of eliminating your own self-judgment. Then you can help eliminate the judgment you're feeling against somebody else. And, really, in the end, we should all be interviewing one another. And I guess another thing that is in this book is this author says that we should all have two things in our back pocket that we can be vulnerable about without it being an awkward conversation with a stranger. You earn trust and can connect with people when you're vulnerable.
Totally.
And so having these two things in your back pocket, you immediately kind of dump that out, in a completely awkward way, but it comes out in conversation, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's cool.
Yeah,
I'm okay with this guy."
Yeah,
and I can also open up to him or her
totally
because of that.
Yeah, we mentioned this in the humility podcast, but the people that have influenced me the most were the people that were like, "Yeah, I'm, messed up here and not doing great there, but I'm good here," and like we're honest and real, and like we said in that podcast, people like are dying for authenticity. And so when you offer those, two little nuggets of vulnerability, and no one is perfect. No one is totally organized and totally creative and, a people person and an engineer and, like all these like things that pull us away from, if you're going to go in one direction as a strength, it's going to probably pull you away from other things. And there is no like totally well-rounded, tens all around human. So you may connect with someone by saying like, I'm disorganized, but I'm highly creative. And they may go, "Hey man, me too. Let's hang out." Or they go, "I'm the opposite. Let's work together." Kind of like let's leverage our weaknesses and strengths with each other. And so the world is better when we do that.
Yes. Yep. Great. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Great
discussion. Thank you very much, Benjamin. And judge not.
Yeah. Love everybody
always.
Love
everybody always.
And love yourself always.
And love yourself first.
Yeah.
Yep. Great.
Awesome. Thanks,
Love you,
Dad.
guy.
Love you too.
Thanks.